Welcome to the press conference for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, or as I like to refer to it at my house, in-laws, am I right? My name is Gray Drake, I am Ms. Movie Phone, and I am so pleased to welcome our guests today. Everybody put your hands together for Ed Skrein, Chiwetel Ejofor, Michelle Pfeiffer, Angelina Jolie, Elle, Dickinson, Sam Riley, and Yoga Roning. Fun fact, the chairs up here are much more comfortable than they look. I'd like to go down the line and just ask everybody first, if there was something that you could have taken from the set, or did take from the set, what would it be? Because this was such a visually rich and amazing thing to watch. I figured there has to be something, right? So, Ed, I'm going to put you on the spot. We'll start down here.
Well, I've started a sort of personal tradition that when there's a job that I enjoy thoroughly, I ask for a clapperboard. So I actually asked the first AD for a Maleficent clapperboard and got one sent to me afterwards. Everyone's now like, why didn't I ask for one? Where's my one?
So you take the actual slate from the
film? Yes, I've got the slate. I've got the slate at home in my office, and yeah, it means a lot to me.
That's awesome. How many of those do you have?
It would be telling if I said I only had 3. After saying the jobs that I enjoyed thoroughly. But yeah, no, I've got 3.
Got it. What about you, Chiwetel?
I would have kept the cheekbones. I miss them still.
Yeah, solid.
I would have kept my pearls.
Yes, girl.
I took my staff.
Oh, where do you keep it?
Honestly, it goes into the children's rooms, and then I don't. It actually is right now.
That's fair.
I would have kept the spindle.
That's very telling.
Yeah.
Right? Says
I
something
think it's just
about
very
you.
classic Sleeping Beauty, you know, like good decor.
Still drawn to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, in actually seeing the spindle again, I would like to ask you, is it as sharp as it looks in real life?
No,
It can't be,
it's
right?
not. But it does look. I mean, if you really slammed it down, that would be bad. No, it's.
Aurora's much too graceful for that.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
I had a really nice wig, so it would have been cool to keep that and just pop that out now and again.
That was a good wig, I have
It was
to
good,
say.
yeah, it was nice, but they wouldn't let me
Nice little
keep it, so.
It was quite glorious, I second that. What about you, Sam?
I like the cloak, but I do have a bag of feathers.
Do you?
Just, yeah.
That are just hanging around?
Yeah.
How do you explain
Little
that?
out of them.
How do you explain just a bag of feathers to people? You just look at them, you're like,
Well,
"Hold on."
sometimes people write to me and I send them feathers back.
That's fantastic. What a great little addition to put in a fan letter. All right, what about you, Yoko?
Well, I did get Harry's wig, actually. No, I asked for the spindle as well, they wouldn't let me.
And I'll stay down there and ask you, you are coming into this sequel, and the first film is like I said earlier, it's so visually rich. This is such a memorable looking film visually. Can you talk about coming into that in the second movie, and what was your vision for expanding on that? Because I feel like somehow the world really did get bigger in this film.
Yeah, there's also always like a fine line also in regards to, you know, what to keep from this beloved universe, because you do want to keep a lot of that also, you know, and what's important to the fans. And at the same time, for me as a filmmaker, it's important to make something original and take, you know, Maleficent to the next level and kind of like make Maleficent 2.0. But I do think that a lot of I feel a huge part of the success of the first film was that it had such a strong emotional core. And I think that was the most important thing for me, to continue telling that story. You know, the story about Maleficent and Aurora, and that's definitely also something that I can relate to as a parent myself.
let's come back down here to the new members of the Maleficent family. And Ed, I was thinking that you've been in some really visually amazing films, but can you talk about joining this crew and some of the physical demands and how you got into character? Because you make a huge impression by the time you put on war paint. I was like, yes. Did I make it weird? I hope I made it a little weird.
Thank you. I mean, there were so many layers to the preparation for this. Obviously, you know, before I met anybody from the cast and the crew, you know, I create the character in isolation, you know, analyzing the script and doing the kind of intellectual side of it. That's one side of things. And then once I came in and we started to go through the...
Something that's added later, so you guys are just fabulous with horns.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, fabulous with horns and some nubs, and then a lot of CG wings later. Yeah.
I was also really excited to see you in this movie because I was like, Salt reunion, yay! Can you talk just for a second, Angelina? We're gonna just pretend you're not here for a second. Can you talk about working with Angelina again? And especially kind of in the same neighborhood of character as far as like a strong, nuanced female goes.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great time making Salt all those years ago, and so it was really exciting to get a chance to do stuff. You know, I mean, obviously it's completely different, but you're right. You know, it's these very dynamic, very interesting characters. They have a really interesting relationship in this film, and so. And some of that is sort of unsaid as well, and just sort of felt in the sense of connection. And so all of that was really rich, and so it was great to do that. Yeah.
Were you? I don't want to spoil what happens at the end of the movie, but were you walked through some of the more amazing visual aspects of where your character ends up? Was that described to you, or was that a surprise when you saw the film?
I mean, a lot of it was a surprise for me, you know, because, I mean, I did try to get
anything.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to get as much of a sense as I could, and we looked through some of the design and, you know, just the feel of it, and actually the design process was quite collaborative in terms of Conall's look, you know, but yeah, it was stunning to see it all kind of put together. It was beyond my imagination, certainly.
Michelle, I wanted to ask you, Maleficent is a fairy tale, but yet it feels very modern, and it feels very of the moment. And I wonder if you can talk about coming into this story that features, you know, 3 women who are very different in their power, and just I think the writing really stands out as to how different all these women are.
And if I could take one thing away from today, it would be your shoes, by the way. I would like to
Thank you so
leave
much.
Today with those sneakers.
I would like to see you in them.
That was no accident, Michelle Pfeiffer. Thank you so much. Yes. Make sure please quote her if you can.
So yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about this film is, yes, it is a fairy tale, but at the same time, it isn't it's a very unusual fairy tale. It's what I loved also about the first film. It was so surprising, and it, you know, it just didn't, what I loved is that it kind of played in this gray area, and it talked about, you know, good versus evil, and in that we all of us have a little bit of everything in us, and I think in terms of strength and how that manifests itself, and it's differently in everyone. And one of the things we loved about, for instance, Aurora's character is that, you know, in many ways she is ultimately the strongest and the wisest of all of us. I mean, my character is really brilliant and diabolical, but I wouldn't consider her terribly wise. So I do think it's interesting the way, and I like the way it plays out.
It's interesting that you would say that, because it makes me think about how there's a vulnerability to wisdom. And that's not a word that I would associate with Ingrith necessarily.
Well, I mean, everybody has vulnerability, and I think, you know, she's damaged, without getting too, cerebral about the whole thing. But nobody sort of behaves that way unless they're incredibly damaged on some level. So yeah, she just doesn't wear it on her sleeve, I guess. And in some ways, what she resorts to is really, really, truly, at the end of the day, really out of a very deep fear.
Always is. Elle, speaking of which, I was thinking about how in the first movie your character is blessed with happiness. And yet in this movie she runs into a lot of really dark situations. But do you feel that that personality trait that she has affects how you play the character and affects her experience?
Yes, I mean, obviously, in the original fairy tale, she's, granted with these gifts when she's a baby. And I think Aurora, she symbolizes the good and the kindness in the world and the acceptance. And obviously that was really shown in the first film because she's much younger and much more innocent, and but still introduced to some dark things. I mean, you killed my dad, so thanks, Mom. And so that, but it does carry over.
I don't know why people keep bringing that up.
I know. But that does carry over, into the second film. Right, it's okay. Carries over to the second film of her kind of embodying this this really overwhelming love of life and want. And she lives in between both worlds. She's a human, but she is queen of the Moors and has grown up amongst the Moor folk, and so she lives harmoniously with both sides, so she doesn't understand why the world can't do that. But she's, in the second film, what's so great is that she's definitely a young woman now, and she's grown up, she is stronger, she has much more conviction in herself, and she's learning how to gain her independence. And I love the family theme in the movie because it's very realistic to real life of growing up and kind of separating from leaving the nest and also making your own choices in life. I mean, she obviously is disapproving of Prince Phillip, but we know that love wins, and she kind of Aurora stands up to Maleficent, which was such a very, very strong moment in the film too. I think it might be shocking for fans to see that because Aurora's taking charge of her own life. So, but with kindness, which is the most powerful of all. We didn't want Aurora to then be a lot of films they put her in armor and have a sword and she's fighting and that makes her strong, and that's not Aurora's true nature, and that isn't necessarily true. I love that she symbolizes that for also young girls. I was that girl, and I was always soft and wanted to be a mom and wanted to get married and very feminine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we get to show the strength in accepting your femininity, and Aurora does it in a pink dress. Very badass.
That's right. So badass. Yeah, I kind of felt like I've watched that character grow up, and so in this movie I was really proud to see where she ended up as a fan, because it's not easy to stand up against those other strong women. Yeah, she does it. She's smashing through windows.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Angelina, what does this movie say about family to you? 'Cause this one's all about family.
It's about family. It's also about it's about a few things to me. It is about family, and it's Aurora and Maleficent were first brought together and became a family. They weren't really expecting it. Maleficent was harmed in her life, and she'd lost herself and lost her ability to, I think, be soft or feel love, and the love of a child, which certainly happened for me in my life. Being a mother brought out something in me that completely transformed me, and I think. But we are different. We're different creatures in the film, and so there are metaphors in the film, and not to be heavy about it, but always I think a good film for young people has these messages, and I think there's a real question in the film. We get pulled apart. People tell us, because you're not the same, you're not family. Because you're not exactly like her, you're not her mother. And that certainly strikes a chord with me. And I think Maleficent questions whether she's good enough to be a mother, and whether she is her mother. And so in the middle of this film, we go on different journeys, and she finds herself in this idea, well, I'm like this, I was born this way, so that must be my true nature. And I think, well, I guess I'm a creature, and I'm like this, so that must be my true nature. So we go through this period in the middle of the film where everybody's really focusing on their differences, how different we are, and we go to our own corners with our separate backgrounds or ways of being, or who we are, or how we're born. And then there's a real push to say this is not how it should be, and this is not how to live, and diversity makes us stronger, and there must be a better way forward, and we have to come together. And so we do that in the film with the humans and the creatures and the Morpho coming together. We do that as a family, and we come together and we fight against this separation, and we unite, and we say this is the world we choose to live in. And I think that that is a really important message.
I also think something that occurred to me too is that there's so much beauty in sometimes truly understanding how others see you as well. And they share this beautiful moment at the end, and
Well, to be your true self, right? To say, this is who we are. We are the pretty pink, beautiful, soft princess, and we are the slightly manic creature that maybe is a very bad temper, and many, many other things. And yet I see her exactly as she is, and I don't want her to be any different than she is. And she sees me as I am, and she accepts me as I am. And so it is to say to everybody, be yourself, be your true self. Life is not, we don't live forever. Say to children, don't be, no matter what people see, how they see you, how they say you should be, you'll suffocate. Be your true nature, whatever that may be, and you will find a home for it, and you will find acceptance. Because you have to.
And speaking of true nature, I hear that there's true nature might be a ping pong champion between the two of you.
Why is it not that I can remember who won?
I know, it's strange.
Maybe we were called to set? I don't know.
exactly.
It wasn't me.
The game is
Michelle's still upset because she wasn't
invited.
How dare you?
Because we knew you'd just be so good. Were you invited?
I wasn't.
So it's a private,
Yeah, it's
pending private ping pong party. Got it. Harris.
We played
Well.
in our own time.
I won.
Nice. Prince Phillip in this movie is really torn between his family and then sort of his chosen family, his new family. How does your character deal with that enormous conflict in that really fabulous way?
Thank you. Well, it's difficult because we sort of open on him, and there's like pre-existing mindset that Ulster, the kingdom, and his family are sort of living in, and they're at a more mature level in their relationship, and you want to start making sort of choices for yourself and leading a new way forward. So it's sort of coming up against that, and it's difficult when you're going up against your own sort of parents as well. So I think that's something that he struggles with continuously, and then along with Aurora, we sort of strive for change and just try and support that.
And Sam, Diaval has such a unique relationship with Maleficent. Can you talk about the evolution of that relationship in this film, as well as what's the behind the scenes? Because I remember seeing in the behind the scenes of the first film, flapping your arms and running out of a scene, ducking down as you're poof, turning into something else. But tell us about that evolution for this film.
Well, one of the things I really enjoyed about the first one was the sort of the bickering that we had between one another, and I imagine that's developed over the last 6 years. We've become sort of surrogate parents of Aurora, and Diaval is sort of one of the only ones who is brave enough to contradict her in some of her behaviors or suggest, you know, means of being more polite or how humans behave. And we had a lot of fun playing this sort of thing. The thing about the movement is I met a raven before the first one to study him. He's a big star in the bird world. And a movement coach so that I could maybe incorporate bird-like mannerisms. And they wanted me to run around a room flapping my wings. And we can film this, he said. I was like, under no circumstances are we filming this. I mean, the transformation is a bit silly. I was more used to it this time, but I remember the first day on set of the very first film, Angie was stood with her back to me with the horns, and I had to go from being crouched down to jumping up in the air. And it's kind of embarrassing in front of a massive crew of people, but fortunately the special effects make it look fabulous.
Yeah, they covered that part up
Yeah, they
really
did,
well.
fortunately.
Yeah. Joachim, let's talk more about this new land that we're seeing, the land of the Fae. Can you talk about the process of creating that world? What were some of your initial ideas that came to land?
Yeah, no, I think it was important for us to you know, create a bigger universe for this movie, and in that sense, this is, you know, Maleficent's being thrown into exile and discovers that she's not the only.
Let's make sure we give time to open it up to the audience for any questions about the film. Go ahead. Right there. Yep.
Hi. One of the themes of this film is about looking at villains in a new light. For Miss Jolie and Miss Pfeiffer, I wonder, are there any iconic movie villain performances that you're particular fans of or took inspiration from?
I like Michelle as Catwoman.
I think the first thing that came to mind was Heath Ledger in Batman as the Joker. I didn't take that as inspiration, but you know, my favorite villain, I think.
Great.
I'll just talk loud. You have some amazing costumes in this, and I was just wondering how each of you, did you? There you go. Oh, there you go. Did you have a favorite? And for Angelina specifically, some of those look like you kind of could poke yourself at some point. Was there any of them more treacherous than others, and what was your favorite?
I did actually poke myself often with the one from because when the bones would flip up, and it was terribly hard to do it. But it's all fun. You know, it's as you know, Ed was speaking about, it's that you get so supported in these roles with the magic, everybody working towards this idea of helping with the costumes or the visual effects or the makeup to help bring you into a creature, and it's a big team. And so the costumes are certainly part of it. Some of my costumes were half there, and then we had to be flying in with rigs and things that would... The trick of the Maleficent thing sometimes is that I need to look strong when I'm on the ground, but then they have to float when I'm up in the air. So that's fun.
You actually just might have touched on something kind of fascinating as well. What are you saying about flying?
Without giving anything away, can you talk to me about the importance of self-sacrifice in the film?
Who wants to take that one?
I mean, I think that is, when we talk about love, it's that knowing, there is that knowing yourself that we spoke of earlier, being your true self, but really, you know, I think the core of it is what, you know, we're not here just to exist. You have to know what you stand for, you have to know what you're willing to fight for, even die for. And if you live that way, then whatever pain comes with it, whatever sacrifice comes with it, you embrace it, and it actually fills you with purpose. And I think that's I hope represented a bit in the film.
Right there on the end, and Juan, yeah.
This question is for Michelle. Angelina mentioned Catwoman, and you have a very eclectic filmography, but the villains that you played are very, very memorable. Did you see Ingrith as a sort of opportunity to top what you've done before in that sort of terrain of villainy?
No, boy, never actually looked at a part that way. I enjoyed playing this. I was really delighted and surprised when I read the script, and I was excited just at the notion of working with these two, and then I was again really surprised when I thought, oh wow, this is actually a really interesting, great part. I think you just approach them all differently, and I had a lot of fun doing this, and I felt like I had a lot of freedom to try and bring some other colors other than, try to find the humanity. And, I think when you ask the question about self-sacrifice, it may not appear at first blush that Ingrith is... It's complicated.
It always is. Right there on the edge. And the mic will be there in just a second for you.
All right. Congratulations, everybody. Angelina, you've had such a remarkable career. And I read that Maleficent is the biggest box office hit of all your movies. Can you talk about what you think people responded to, why that was so? And were you channeling a little bit of Bette Davis doing Maleficent this time?
I don't know if it was. I certainly looked to and thought of. I think when I was little and I saw the cartoon or the animated film. Forgive me, Disney. Clearly she was drawn with that inspiration and the voice, the original voice, and the original women that she was, and I was so drawn to. And of course, all of those women. I mean, there's so much to learn from them. Any comparison, I'm very grateful for in any possible way, even a scratch of a hint of her. It's funny. I don't know. It's hard when you made this strange thing as an actor. You don't, when you're not an actor, you kind of, you're always figuring out who you are, how people see you. You don't know as much. Maybe now with social media, everybody knows everybody's opinion. But as an actor, you are. It's strange. You put yourself forward, and somebody says, "Well, that's very you," and you think, "Really? Is it?" And when I got a call and they said, "Well, we thought you were the only person that could play Maleficent. It was so obvious." And then everybody else says, "Well, it was so obvious." And you just think, I'm really not sure how I'm supposed to take that. And yet I love her. So maybe I just need to fully embrace it at this time in my life. Maybe when I was, years ago when we first did it, I thought, well, I need to find, the other aspects of her, and it's obviously not just completely that she's a bit wild and full on and a bit much and fun. And now, I've been through different things in my life, and I was so happy to feel strong again and to have some fun. And I adore being her, and there's something about her that I'm now very proud that I'm associated with her.
Thank you.
Speaking of having fun, this really seems like it's one of those sets. Chiwetel, can you describe, while you're on set, and I was saying earlier, all these people in these amazing Fae costumes, can you talk about what it was like just being behind the scenes on this and coming into this family?
Yeah, I mean, that was really an amazing day, my first day, with the whole, and that understanding of a sense of self and a sense of place, and something to fight for. They're so defined by being in this conflict with humans, and so there's all this kind of psychological drama that's bonding all of the Fae. And it was just interesting to play, it was interesting to think about. It was just so easy to relate to it in the world as it is right now. And just all of the kind of themes that we're all dealing with, just sort of outside of all of that, and to kind of explore that in this way was very freeing, but also just sort of very grounding and exciting.
All right, let's get in the back there. Raise your hands high. What about right there? Yep. The mic's right there.
Hi, I have a question for you, Angelina. In this movie, Maleficent struggles a lot with Aurora leaving home, and your son went to university recently. Did this role kind of prepare you to deal with it in real life?
Well, to be very honest, I'm so proud of Maddox was so ready and he's doing so well. And I was actually the most moved because he spent these days with me as I thought I was preparing him to go. And I was like making sure he had the right shoes, he had the right jacket, or this, right, you get the right glasses, you get the right everything, and you're working so hard as a mother, and you think, I'm really helping him. And then, and then at the airport, I said, no, he stayed with me he could have let me stay a little bit longer, and I kept thinking, he wants to be with me a little longer, that's so sweet. And then I realized at some point he looked at me, and he said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And I realized the entire week was all for me, and he was just making sure I was okay. And he gave me a really big hug, because he knew I needed it. And I knew that he was okay, because he was the kind of man that knew that what I needed, and he gave it to me in a loving way. And so I left feeling really, proud, but I did cry a few times on the plane. But I do remember, well, I don't know if we can say, there's a part of this movie where I have to let her go a bit, and it wasn't in the script, and I didn't quite let her go. And Diaval has to come in and say, let her go. And that got me every time, because I would think of, all of the kids, and then that moment that you really have to let them go. But it's also exciting.
All right, I think we have time for just one more. In the back there? Yep. That mic's coming towards you. That's how I burn time. That mic's coming towards you.
I absolutely loved the film. I want to ask you about the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner scene. It was pretty brilliant, that tension. So how did you maintain the tension? Because, you have to shoot individually, obviously. So how did you maintain that tension? Obviously, some good editing, but as well, the reactions are priceless for anyone who's involved in that scene.
Maintaining the tension. Well, I think there's also it's that commitment to just being there for each other.
The tension was nobody wanted to be the one to wreck the take, because it was so long. Every angle, every shot was a master. And,
You can feel there's this odd, there was those days where we were all thinking, why are we...
Yeah, we shot it for a week as well.
A lot of
I think it was longer than that. I think it was longer than that.
I was happy we were sitting. I felt like I was just having dinner with friends for a week, and I thought it was great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
The world's
But I think the tension is really you're kind of just being there for each other, and whenever it's somebody's piece, you just have
kind of like a ping pong game.
You have to stay. Oh, you're on. I felt that challenge is so accepted.
You set me up.
All right, I think that brings us to the end, sadly. I can't take any more questions, but if y'all wouldn't mind staying seated while our guests leave, please give it up for Ed Skrein, Chiwetel.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for
Pfeiffer, Angelina Jolie, Elle, Dickinson, Sam Riley, and Ejofor. Maleficent is in theaters October 18th. I am Ms. Movie Phone, and thank you for coming today.